Can't be on. It's a meeting. You can't be on Zoom. And don't wag because you're going to disconnect my wires
Yeah.
over there.
All right, Sean, we all set?
Yep, let me just start the recording and we'll be ready to go. Okay, Mr. Chair, we are live.
Thank you, Sean. All right, I'll call this January 25th, 2021 meeting of the Richmond Zoning Board of Review to order in accordance with Executive Order 20-05 by Governor Gina Raimondo dated March 16, 2020. This meeting is being teleconferenced live on Zoom. I'll now do a roll. If the board members could respond as present, I'd be appreciated. Chair Nick Solitro, present. Vice Chair Jeff Valencourt.
Present.
Board Member Sean Carney. Sean, did I hear you? All right. Board Member Chelsea Battinger.
Present.
Board Member Daniel Jarsfer.
Present.
Board Alternate Karen Bazzano.
Present.
And Board Alternate Lindsay Hannon.
Present.
All right. We also have staff present. Town Solicitor Karen Ellsworth, I see, is here. Town Planner Sean Lacey. Zoning Official Russell Bo Brown is with Sean Lacey. Our zoning clerk is also here. Stenographer, our zoning clerk Sam Patton is also here. Stenographer Mary Ellen Hall is present, as is Town Solicitor Michael Casalino. To maintain order and avoid background noise, we'll keep everybody that isn't a panelist muted, and we'll review each agenda item and unmute those individuals wishing to speak as we move through the agenda. If you're joining us by computer or on the Zoom app on your phone, you have an option to raise your hand. With that being said, if you wish to make a comment during any of the agenda items, please use that feature to raise your hand using your user controls, and staff will unmute you. If you're joining by a phone line, if you're calling in and wish to raise your hand, you'll need to dial *9 to raise your hand. And once called upon, please dial *6 to unmute yourself. So *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself if you're calling in on a phone. I want to remind the zoning board members, as well as the public, that each time you speak, especially in this format that we find ourselves in, if you could identify yourself so that everybody, most especially our stenographer, knows who's speaking, that would be appreciated. That being said, we'll go to item B on our agenda, the election of officers. Do we have a motion for chair?
Why doesn't one of you just make a motion that all of the current officers be reelected?
This is
Happy to-
Chelsea Danger. I make a motion that all the present officers be reelected.
Sean Carney, I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All
Jeff
right.
Valencourt, aye.
Looks like all in favor. All right. That brings us to item C on our agenda, the approval of the minutes of both November 23rd, 2020, as well as December 21st, 2020. I know board members received that the other day by email. Were there any issues in those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, this is Daniel Jarstfer. I didn't see any issues. I move the approval of both sets of minutes, November 23rd, 2020, December 21st, 2020.
I'll second that. I appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sean Carney, aye.
Jeff
Yeah.
V, aye.
Daniel, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, aye.
All right. That brings us to item D. I know, or at least I'm informed, that we have a matter that's going to be continued tonight. Is that still the case, Sean? Is the Wawalo matter, the second on the agenda under D, going to be continued?
Well, I think I see Mr. Surdot on the call. I could promote him to panelist to have him address that continuance if it pleases the board.
Yeah, please do. I just, for the sake of efficiency, and in case there's other folks that are here for that application, I don't want them to be stuck all night waiting for something that's going to be continued. So if you could let Attorney Surdit in, I'd appreciate that. And while we're waiting for that, the matter that we'll be dealing with in the moment is under D, continued business number 2, the application of Wawalome Reservation, Inc. for a special use permit to modify a previously approved special use permit such that the applicant wishes to replace batting cages with a 70-foot by 165-foot storage building for a campground. Premises located at 510 Gardner Road, Richmond, Rhode Island. Assessors Plat 1E, Lot 17, 10 through 15, and 19-2, pursuant to Chapter 18.48 and Chapter 18.52 of the Richmond zoning ordinance. This has previously been continued from August 24th, 2020, September 28th, 2020, as well as October 26th, 2020, and November 23rd, 2020. I see that Attorney Surdit has joined us.
Good morning, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here this evening. In speaking with your staff and watching your agendas, you have a large continuing matter. So in light of that, and in light of not wishing to put any further burdens and time constraints on anyone else, including ourselves, we request that this matter be continued 1 additional month.
Thank you, Counsel. I appreciate the consideration. I will make the motion to consider this, or excuse me, to continue this matter 1 month. Do we have Karen, do we have a date certain for 1 month? And you're just muted, Karen, if you can unmute yourself.
I muted myself to avoid canine interruptions.
Understood.
The date is February 22nd.
All right, I'll make the motion to continue the Wawalome matter to 2/27. Is there a second to that motion?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Don Carney, aye. Lindsay Graham,
Daniel
aye.
Darst,
All right, I think we got everybody. I did hear Daniel there at the end. All right, that brings us to back up to continued business number 1, the application of GD Richmond Beaver River 1 LLC, 3760 Quaker Lane, North Kingstown, Rhode Island, for a special use permit to install a 5.3 megawatt AC solar energy system pursuant to Richmond zoning ordinance, Chapter 18.34, entitled Solar Energy Systems, and Chapter 18.52.060, entitled Special Use Permits. Premises located at 172 Beaver River Road, Assessors Plat 8E, Lot 12. I understand the counsel for the applicant is here. As I've stated previously, I do have a conflict with this matter, so I am going to turn it over to Vice Chair Jeff Valencourt. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Nick. So what are we looking at to continue this? We had some,
I believe that last month you were about to allow the town to put on some evidence, but Mike was not with us, so we couldn't do that. I later found out that he had COVID, so he had a pretty good excuse not being with you, but he's here tonight. So if the board, if it's up to the board, if the board wants to hear testimony on this from the town, you should let Mike Coslino take over.
Mr. Vice Chairman, this is Daniel Darstford.
yes, Daniel.
We received a packet and there were some things that had been discussed in our last meeting that the applicant forwarded along. I don't know if that's appropriate to take those up before we hear from the town, or if we can come back and revisit those presentations, or just take them as information.
That's up to you guys. You can do it in whichever order you would like to. If you would like the applicants, some of the applicants' witnesses to come back on and answer questions before you hear from another party, you can do that.
I think I would like to, and you guys also tell me, I think I'd like to hear from the town. I'd like to hear, their presentation. And then I'd like to circle back and revisit this information that was presented to us.
You do that.
Yeah, so
I have no objection.
yeah, okay. Anybody else on the board feel that that's a good moving forward there, Sean?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right, let's do that. Let's hear from the town. Michael, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Mike Cozzolino, the town co-solicitor with Ms. Ellsworth. I'm here on behalf of the town to briefly reiterate the town's position with reference to this project. I'd like to bring out 2 points, basically, bring those to the board's attention regarding the advisory decision of the planning board that was issued, and I believe it's Exhibit 30 that's been put in the record previously. The ultimate finding
Can
of
I
the
just
planning.
interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure.
I just realized today that the copy of the advisory development plan review decision is not the official copy of that decision. It doesn't have a date or a signature on it. I don't know how it got into the record, but it doesn't belong there. Sean needs to get the correct copy with the signature and date and substitute that for the document that you have. That's all I had.
Okay, and
Sorry.
I'll make my presentation based upon the assumption that what Sean is going to file mirrors what's already been admitted as Exhibit 30, but for.
Yeah, the language
other
is all the
signatures.
same. It's just not an official copy.
Correct.
Yeah, I think there was just I'm looking at the soft copy now. It looks like the soft copy was just now, it wasn't signed and dated. The hard copies that we have in house are, so we'll, that's an easy fix. No problem. We'll have that uploaded accordingly.
Okay, just to continue, with reference to that advisory decision from the planning board, their ultimate finding was to recommend against this project. The board found that the project as proposed was not consistent with the comprehensive community plan and recommended against the same. The board based its finding basically on 2 different points. They refer to policy NC 16, which identifies a goal of maintaining scenic rural landscapes, vistas, cultural and historical resources. Here, the planning board recognized that this site is eligible for potential listing on the National Register of Historic Places. The planning board found that the planner in the decision contacted the State Historic Preservation and Heritage Commission to determine if this project, the solar array, would have an effect on that designation, and was informed that it absolutely would. Further, the Richmond Historical Society submitted a letter expressing their concerns in this regard. It's also included in the application and requested denial. Therefore, the planning board found that this plan was inconsistent with the comprehensive community plan. Further, the planning board found that the project would alter the character defining elements that contribute to the pastoral setting, which are the very elements making it eligible for the inclusion into the National Register of Historic Places. Secondly, the planning board cites policy NC2, whose goal is to protect rare and unique natural resources, as well as goal LU8, which is to encourage development that protects the town's historical heritage. They made a finding that this project is on such a large commercial scale is incompatible with rural, forested, and agricultural-based settings of the Beaver River Road and detract from the town's historical heritage. Lastly, the planning board made reference to a brief discussion of the amendment of zoning ordinance 1834-030A, which in part, in the board's opinion, clarified the intent of the parameters of the solar energy system and its requirements to be within 2 miles of a utility substation. Their analysis came to a conclusion that just to back up, this project is governed by the first draft of the ordinance, which states that the solar energy system shall be located within 2 miles of the utility substation. After the application was filed, an amendment was passed to the ordinance, which stated that the change was that the entire lot which a solar system is located shall be within 2 miles of a substation. And the planning board made a finding that this was more of a clarification than an actual change in the ordinance. Like I said, the prior ordinance is the one that would govern this project. And I think it's worth spending a couple minutes on discussing the impact of that original ordinance and how it applies to this project. Just to take a little deeper look, it's just a 1-sentence section, but it's probably the more important one of this application. There's a couple parts to it. Number one is they describe a solar energy system. So we have to say, all right, what's a solar energy system?
Mike,
So-
excuse me,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Are you going to put Mr. Brown on as a witness?
Yes, once I go through
Oh,
the
okay.
history of it, I'll ask
Sorry.
everything.
So,
Okay. So 1834-010 defines what a solar energy system is. It's very clear. It consists of a solar panel, an array, and several associated substructures. There's 6 other sections in the ordinance. There's no ambiguity there. So it's clear that that's what the town meant by a solar energy system. Subsequent to that, we look to where you can put this solar energy system. Section 1834-030A describes that the solar energy system, i.e. the panels and associated structures, shall be located within 2-mile radius of the utility substation. Once again, it doesn't appear that there are any ambiguities as far as that's concerned. And I would like to call Bo Brown at this point just to get his opinion on it as a zoning enforcement officer. If Bo could be sworn in. Hello?
Raise your right hand, Mr. Brown. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Can you hear me?
You, can you, yeah, I can hear you, Mary
All right.
Ellen.
Well, I just gave you the oath and you didn't answer, so I'm going to repeat it, okay? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
No, thank you. Please state your full name for the record.
Russell Brown,
Thank you.
zoning officer, town of Richmond.
Mr. Brown, how long have you been so employed by the town of Richmond?
In this part-time position, I believe, 2009, about 8 or 9, 10 years.
And what is your position with the town?
It's zoning enforcement officer.
And before you were a zoning enforcement officer for the town of Richmond, were you a zoning enforcement officer in any other towns?
Yes, I was for the town of South Kingstown for 38 years.
And what are your qualifications to be zoning inspector? Zoning enforcement officer, I'm sorry.
I think 38 years in South Kingstown qualified me as zoning officer.
Now, during the course of your employment with the town of Richmond, do you have an occasion to review the Big Beaver River project that we're here for tonight?
Yes, I have.
I can't hear you, Bo.
Yes, I have.
And for what reason would it be within your purview to review this project?
Initially, I was asked by town planner Julianne Berry to she had asked me a question, whether a certain lot would qualify under this section, 1834.030.
Was that, was that lot this applicant's property?
Yes, it is.
And and she wanted your opinion as to whether this site would be suitable for a solar energy system?
Yes, and it was my decision that after review of section 1834.030, that the solar energy system shall be within 2 miles of a utility substation. And it says the solar energy system, not a portion of it. The system itself must be within the 2 miles.
And did you give her your opinion as to whether this project is suitable for that or not?
Yes,
That
I
property.
did, and she sent it to the applicant at that time.
I think you need to testify about what your opinion was.
My opinion that I gave to Julianne Berry, town planner, and that was dated April 2nd, 2018. You have asked if a lot or parcel of land in an R3 zoning district has a portion of that lot or parcel within 2 miles of a utility substation. Can the remaining portion of the lot or parcel of land that is outside of the 2 mile radius be used as a solar energy system? And my answer was that 18.34.030A is very clear that the solar energy system, emphasize the solar energy system, must be located within 2 miles of a utility substation. Therefore, any area outside of the 2 mile radius cannot be used as a solar energy system. End of quote.
And just for the record, that's your letter dated April 2nd, 2018, which has been introduced as Exhibit 32.
Yes.
Thank you. So to conclude that the word within can mean anything different than what Bo described, Mr. Brown described it as, would lead to a legal absurdity. If it was a 100-acre parcel and enough land for one panel to fit within the 2 mile radius, then theoretically could bootstrap a 100-acre lot into that project, or a 200 or a 300 acre. I mean, it just leads to a legal absurdity that you could bootstrap that much just by having a small portion of the property within the 2 mile radius. And one can argue the differences between the two ordinances, but I would offer that it's a difference without a distinction, because in the end, the language of the solar energy system did not change. So all of those components under either statute and either ordinance would have to fall within that 2 mile radius. I just was trying to come up with an analogy as to how we can make that even clearer. And the other thing I come up with was, if you put your toe in the water, doesn't mean you went swimming. And based upon that, Mr. Brown's opinion, the town would urge a denial of this application. If you have any follow-up questions of either myself or Mr. Brown, I'd be happy to answer those.
Mike, I think you need to put on some testimony concerning the exact location of the proposed system and in relationship to the location of the 2-mile radius.
Bo, how much of this project is within the 2-mile radius?
If you give us 1 second, let us look at the plan.
Okay. This project is approximately 40 acres, correct, Bo?
Yes.
On Beaver River Road.
Your question was how much of the solar energy system was within the 2-mile
Correct,
area? What portion of it?
correct.
I really don't have an amount, but it's very little. Because I believe there's a area of wetlands on the area that's within the 2-mile area.
Do
So
you have
As
an
a map-
exhibit, Bo? Do you have an exhibit?
I'm gonna say, do you have a map of that, Bo, in front of you? And was that introduced already in prior hearings?
I'm looking at section 9 or exhibit 9 in the applicant's booklet. The first page that shows the 2-mile radius. It's not the scale or anything, so I can't scale it off. If you hold on 1 second, I want to look at a couple of other pictures in that same.
I think the third page in might have that. Yeah. Section
Yes,
9, C 1.3 of 11.
Yeah.
3 and 4 of 11, pages
Yeah.
11.
I'm looking at sheet number C as in Charlie, 1.3 of 11.
And that highlighted yellow portion is the 200-mile area?
Well, this
Or the
sheet
dotted
here-
line?
Yes, the dotted line, I presume, is the 200-foot, I mean, the 2-mile radius line.
Okay.
There's no dimensions or anything on it, so, and it's a reduced plan, so even if I could scale it off, it wouldn't work. So looking at that, it looks, I would
Well-
estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of the area of the lot that's within the 2-mile thing is probably 20%.
Bo, could you ask Sean if he can do a screen share and put that exhibit up so everyone can see what you're talking about?
Actually, probably sheet C 1.4 might be more applicable. It shows the proposed solar panels.
Yeah, I will see if I can screen share that, that exhibit momentarily here.
While we're waiting, Mary Ellen, I just want to note for the record that Karen Bizzano is not sitting on this application because she was not here for the previous parts of the public hearing. So we have five board members because the chair has recused himself.
Okay, this is Sean Lacey. Can everyone see the screen that we're sharing right now?
Yes.
We can, Sean. I can.
Okay, this is sheet C1.4, which shows the layout of the proposed array in relation to the 2-mile radius of a utility substation that was in effect under the previous solar energy systems ordinance.
Where
It
is
would
the 2-mile
appear that
radius?
there's, a fraction of this project falls within the 2-mile radius.
Yeah, where is it? Can you show us where it is?
The screen of my mouse.
Are you referring to the dotted line in the northern portion being outside the 2-mile radius?
Right, if everyone can see my cursor of my mouse, this is the perforated line that shows the 2-mile radius, where the southerly portion of the project here falls within the 2-mile radius of a utility substation, whereas the remainder, which I'm circling here, the northerly end, falls outside of that 2-mile radius.
So just for the record, the horizontal dotted line across the map on C 1.4 of 11 is the 2-mile radius line, correct?
That's correct.
In the southern portion, the area below that dotted line demarcates the solar energy system portion within the 2-mile radius, correct?
That is correct.
And the northern portion is that area outside of the 2-mile radius, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Does the board have any further questions?
I have a question for Bo, zoning official. This is Jeff from Valancourt. So what you're describing is that the portion of the solar array that is within the 2-mile radius would qualify, and the other portion would not. Is that what you're explaining? Can you explain that? What the differential between the line? What does the line represent for us as we're looking at this?
That dotted line it is the 2-mile radius. And under item A, it says that a solar energy system must be located within 2 miles of a utility substation. And it says solar energy system, not a portion of it. That must be within, in order to have a solar energy system, it must be within the 2-mile radius, within the 2-mile radius.
So anything within the 2-mile radius is acceptable.
That is correct. Anything outside of it would be, I mean, if they own 300, 400, 500 acres or 1,000 acres north of that line, why would the council say that it's limited to the within the 2-mile radius? I mean, they would have just said, go ahead anywhere in the R3 zone a solar energy system would be permitted. But that is, they wanted to limit the area, and the area was anything that was 2 miles from the substation, you could put a solar energy system in.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is Daniel Jarstfer.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, so Mr. Brown, your testimony is that the town ordinance, if it intended to permit a system of any size to be acceptable, then if the town had intended that to be acceptable with just a portion within the 2 mile radius, that the town requirement would say so. That would say that a portion of the solar energy system must be within 2 miles. But you're saying, no, the language clearly says the system, the solar energy system must be within 2 miles. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I understand your testimony.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Now, let me also verify or ask this question. So that was the previous section, and it's been amended. I know it doesn't apply, but I just want to see I want to explain to me the difference between the two. So that particular section has now been amended. So just for talking purposes, if this was presented with the amended version, what would that mean versus what is here now?
I would ask legal counsel whether or not we can discuss the amendment or not, as the court said that this had to be decided on the original section that was in at the time.
Well, I believe that Sean has already distributed an exhibit with both versions of the ordinance on it. So it's a little bit too late to say that the board can't consider it. I think what Jeff is asking is what's the difference between the two and what's the relationship?
Correct.
This, as I think I said a couple months ago, this application was filed when the old version of the ordinance was still in effect. And so it's vested under the old ordinance version, even though the ordinance has been amended. We still have to apply the old ordinance version, the previous version of Chapter 1834 to this application. And I think what Mr. Brown just said was that the decision that he gave the town planner at the time that before the application was filed was that the application did not comply with the ordinance as it existed then, which was the prior version of the ordinance. But Bo is correct that you're not considering this application under the newer versions. It's been amended twice, and you're not considering this application under either of those two amendments. You're considering it under the original version of Chapter 1834 that was enacted in, I think, 2017.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question? No?
Not well, correct. Not fully. I just wanted to to hear what the difference would be if this application. I'm just looking for the mirror image of it, or I'm not looking to rule on it. I don't want any consideration on it. I just wanted to know what the new verbiage means for this.
I think you have an exhibit that says that. Sean,
Yeah.
what number is it?
Hi, this is Sean Lacey. The original excerpt of the ordinance versus the subsequent amended one. can be referred to under Exhibit 31 of Town Materials. And within that exhibit, we have the verbiage highlighted to show the original ordinance that was in effect at the time that this application was filed to the subsequent amendment which took place after the filing of this application, clarifying the intent of the location of a project within 2-mile radius of a utility substation.
Sean,
Again, that's Exhibit 31.
that's not Exhibit 31 on the list that I have in front of me that was on tonight's agenda. Can you do another screen share and put that up?
Surely. One moment, please. Okay, Sean Lacey here again. So this is a screen share. Can everyone see my screen here, section 1834030, prior to the amendment of 15 May 2018?
I can see it, Sean.
Okay. Yeah, this is referred to as Exhibit 31 on the agenda for tonight. Karen, just to clarify that, it is 31. And you'll see in the highlighted section, the verbiage changes that had taken place when this application was filed back in, I guess it was sometime in 2018, to the subsequent revisions that took place, clarifying the verbiage at a later time.
Sean, is that Town's Exhibit 31?
Yes.
So it's from the memorandum of law submitted by Fracassa on behalf of a budding property owner?
No,
It's a
it's just
standalone
31.
exhibit, Town Material Exhibit number 31, entitled Section 18.34.030 of the zoning ordinance before and after the amendment.
That's
33,
29.
it's Kelly's.
That's 29, Sean. On the list that I have in front of me that's on tonight's agenda.
The agenda I have is correct. Wait, what's on the screen is Exhibit 31 on my agenda that I have.
Karen,
I'm, so-
if you're
I'm sorry,
referring
but
to,
I can't see who's speaking.
Sorry,
Because of,
Chelsea Batinger.
thank you.
Karen, exhibit number 31 that's referred to tonight that I'm screen sharing right now is listed on the agenda for this evening. And perhaps the confusion about the order of the numbering of the exhibits was that the applicant, since the December zoning board meeting that we had last month, added 3 additional items that they wanted to refer to on the record tonight. And those were itemized as exhibits 27 through 29, which means that the town material exhibits numerically changed subsequently to reflect the applicant's inclusion of their exhibits. So again, it's
what I have
31.
is an uncorrected version, I guess.
So just to clarify, it is exhibit 31.
Okay, so upon review of that, I just wanted to take a look at it and see the difference between the two. And if this was being ruled under today's amendment, then the entire lot would need it and not one solar panel could live on the lot. But in but we are ruling upon the previous zoning ordinance, which would basically state the solar energy system shall be within the 2 miles radius. So as Bo explained, if there's one panel that can fit in that 2 mile radius, then it's a 1-panel solar system. But if it was coming before us today, it wouldn't apply. Not one panel could go on it because the whole lot doesn't fall within the 2 mile radius. Am I correct with my review of that?
No, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I don't think that's the argument that the town is making. Maybe Mike would like to clarify that.
No, I was just arguing, my position is that the term within, as it applies to solar energy system under the applicable ordinance, means that the entire system must be within the 2 mile radius.
So so what you're explaining, or what you're saying is that any portion of the solar array that's within it applies, Bo.
It is, yes, well, I would say that, I think what he's saying is that any portion of the panels or accompanying structures within the 2 mile radius are allowable.
Is that clear?
That is very clear.
Okay, because I think what he's saying is that it didn't comply before and it doesn't comply now. Am I correct or am I wrong?
I believe Bo said that, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Cosiano, this is Daniel Jarsford, board
Sure.
member. When I take a look at this sentence apart, as it was in the ordinance prior to 15 May, we have a noun, system, and the active verb is be, and it shall be within, the system shall be within. The system is a singular whole. Is that what you're saying? It's not commensurate parts. It's the whole system shall be within.
That's correct. If you refer to the ordinance above it, 84-31-010, it's very specific about what a solar energy system consists of. All electric connection, distribution lines shall be underground, all of that, all of the structure as well as the panels constitutes a system.
Do you have any more questions for from the board? Does the town have any more to present tonight?
Not at this time, thank you.
All
Sean
right,
Lacy, nothing else for me, Mr. Vice Chair. Mike summarized the planning board's review pretty well, so thank you.
okay, thank you. Well, we can do one of two things, if I'm not mistaken. We can consider the documentation that was presented to us as from the applicant. We can open that up for review, I guess, and have the applicant come on board and talk and explain all the different items that were proposed, or we can take it under our own advisement and review them on our own. We haven't.
I would recommend that you ask the applicant to answer any questions that you might have about the new material that he just submitted.
Okay. Why don't we do that? Why don't we have them come on board and
Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, I am adding Kevin Moran and John Mancini to the panel. And it looks like they are joining right now. Okay?
Should be good, John.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. John Mancini, representing the applicant. We, as you've indicated, we did provide some additional information, and we can prepare to go through some of that information with you. I have available Mr. Sweeney that provided the additional report concerning the appraisal based on his testimony, as well as Don Layden from Beta Engineering that also provided additional information concerning the buffering, screening, and landscaping. And then also our project engineer, Mr. Moran, is also available. But before I go to that, my question to the chair is, does the applicant have an opportunity to cross-examine the town's witness, Mr. Mr. Brown, I'm sorry.
I would say so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So with that, I would just ask a few questions of Mr. Brown, if possible. I know that he was previously sworn in, so I assume that that continues through the chair.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Brown, you referred to and we'll make a distinction between the old ordinance and the new ordinance. Okay, Mr. Brown? Referring you to the old ordinance, which was section 18.24.30, which reads, a solar energy system shall be located within 2 miles of a utility substation. And it's your testimony that that sentence means that the entire solar energy system must be within 2 miles, meaning that no part of it can be outside of the 2 miles. If it is, it's not permissible. Is that correct?
That is correct. Because solar energy system consists of all the components as defined. So it's my conclusion that you're correct, that everything must be within the 2 mile radius.
And when you made that conclusion, Mr. Brown, what did you review? What did you review in assisting you to make that conclusion with respect to your read of this ordinance?
I read the ordinance and I read the definition.
And which definition? Definition of solar energy system? Is that the definition you're referring to?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And did you ever look at the definition of the word within?
The zoning ordinance does not have that definition.
So if the zoning ordinance does not define a word, what do you do in that instance?
I generally go to Webster's dictionary.
And did you have an opportunity to go to Webster Dictionary to determine what the word within means?
No, I did not. I took it to mean within was within the 2 mile radius. And a solar energy system is defined all the components of it. So it was my conclusion that it had to be inside of that 2 mile radius.
Your conclusion was that the entire system had to be within the 2 mile radius. Is that correct? Your conclusion was that the entire solar energy system had to be within the 2 mile radius.
That's correct, John.
Okay. So if I look at Webster Dictionary, and Webster Dictionary defines within to be the following: in or into the scope or sphere of, or in or into the range of. Does that change your opinion at all?
I would have, that's the first, again, I did not look to Webster Dictionary for the definition of when. I'd have to review it and make a consideration after I read it and read what the ordinance. I had watched the adoption of that section by the council. And it was, in my opinion, clear from watching what the council did at that council meeting, the intent was that everything had to be within the 2-mile radius of the 3 substations that they mentioned. They did not talk about going out further or lots. They did talk about combining lots within the 2-mile radius to make up enough area for the system to be located on. I
And
believe there
before,
was a minimum lot area.
before you made your determination, did you have an opportunity to speak to anyone at the town regarding what your opinion or conclusion concerning this sentence would be?
No, it's my recollection. Miss Berry came into my office and explained the lot and so forth. And I reviewed the section, reread it, looked at everything, and made my determination.
So you alone make,
And sent her the memo that I did on April 2nd, 2018.
so to be clear, so you did not speak to any council member, you did not speak to any other town official, any of a butter, you did not speak to the applicant. You made that determination on your own. Is that correct?
Yeah, I generally do. I may listen to people. I listen to people's arguments all the time, but I read what the ordinance says and make my determination from the language in the ordinance.
But in this case here, did you speak to anyone? In this case here, did you speak to anyone about your determination or your opinion?
No, I made it myself in the office in the back there.
Okay, okay. And
I was all alone. There was, again, Miss Berry came in.
okay, no, I understand. Your testimony was you spoke to no one.
Yep.
That I understand that. And you testified earlier that you didn't look up the word within in the dictionary. Is that because you felt that word was inconsequential, meaning it wasn't important in that sentence?
I read it the way I read it.
Okay. And you read it based on what your personal opinion of the word within is, correct?
Yes.
And you're one final question. You're familiar with the notice requirement prerequisite for filing an application before the zoning board, which is that an applicant has to submit notice to abutters within 200 feet of a proposed project. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the language in that ordinance, are you not?
Repeat that, John.
Are you familiar with the language that describes the requirement for notice in order to submit an application to the zoning board?
No, I know it's in there. I'd have to read the specifics on it.
No worries. So if I say that an applicant is required to provide notice to owners of property within 200 feet of a proposed variance, is that correct?
It seems like it's correct.
Okay. And in determining whether notice was properly issued, if the 200-foot radius touches upon a portion of a lot, in your opinion, does the owner of that lot required to obtain notice if only a portion is touched upon?
Yes, the same way if a portion of a lot under this solar energy system is there, they're allowed to use that portion that's within the 200-foot or 2-mile radius of the substation, but they can't use the outside.
The entire lot gets noticed, and is that, in your opinion, because of the operable word within?
That notice going out to abutters, does that say the whole lot?
Doesn't.
It's, no.
Okay, and you're correct about that. And you also testified that, in your opinion, the sentence, "The solar energy system shall be located within 2 miles of a utility station," very, in your words, very clearly require the entire solar system to be within the 2-mile radius. Correct? Correct, you used the word "very clear." Did you not?
Can you repeat that, John? I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's difficult, I know. But in your testimony, do you recall using the words "very clear," that you felt this statute was not ambiguous? This sentence, in your opinion, had no ambiguity as to whether or not a portion of the system or all of the system needed to be within 2 miles of the substation?
The definition of a solar energy system says it's all the components.
Yep.
I
And then-
mean, that, if it's all the components, then how can a part of it be separated? You know, that's, you know, looking at it, that's what I come to the conclusion on.
And do you have any opinion as to why the council chose to amend the statute or amend that section of the ordinance to read, "The entire lot on which the solar energy system is located shall be within 2 miles of a utility substation"?
I'm not privy to how what came about.
Okay. I'm good, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you. And would you like to continue with the presentation of any of the other material that was presented?
I think, Mr. Chairman, because of time, unless the board has any questions, I think we'll rest with respect to our exhibits as presented. I think the exhibits essentially speak for themselves. The revised landscaping plan, I could have Mr. Layton speak to that, but I think it's probably more efficient if the board members have any particular questions regarding that plan, as well as the report submitted by Mr. Sweeney.
Mr. Vice Chairman Daniel Jarst, I have a question.
Okay, Daniel.
For Mr. Mancini, the abstract that came with the URI property valuation impact study, the abstract basically sums up the whole of what's found in the report. And if I understand the abstract, it indicates that in some cases, and they're specified, that property values are impacted 1.7% if they're within 1 mile. They're depreciated if they're within 1 mile of a solar array. Am I understanding that correctly?
That would be a question for Mr. Sweeney. So if Sean could allow Mr. Sweeney on, we can have that answered.
Yes. Let me just move Mr. Sweeney into as a panelist. One moment, please. Okay, Tom Sweeney should be in as a panelist now.
Mr. Sweeney, this is Daniel Jarts for a board member. My question was with regard to the materials provided, the property value impacts of commercial scale solar energy in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, a study accomplished by personnel, professors and so forth, URI, which came out in September of this last year. The abstract, as I understand an abstract for such a thing, sums up the findings. And the critical sentence, in my view, seems to be there, that using a difference in difference repeat sales identification strategy results suggests that houses within a 1 mile depreciate 1.7% following construction of a solar array, which translates into an annual willingness to pay $279. And later on in the report, it gives a total cost that seems to be annualized, the $279. But the key factor, it seems to be the report is saying that there's a 1.7% of depreciation that seems to be defined into that report. Is that correct?
Mr. Jafar, I'm Am I supposed to be sworn in again? I just want to make sure everything's done right.
No, you don't need to be sworn. You were already sworn in
Okay.
once. You have to remember, you're still under oath.
Yep, okay, thank you. I would make reference, Mr. Jafar, to the, literally that most of the report focuses on non-rural areas. If you look at, I believe it's the very end of section 1 of the report, where it clearly states in the last paragraph, I think it's the second to the last sentence, or excuse me, it is the last sentence. Second to the last sentence, then the last sentence. It says solar developments on landfills and industrial areas or in rural areas have smaller and statistically insignificant effects on prices. It then posits that arrays on farm and forest lands cause greater externalities and again, it finishes, I won't read the whole sentence, but it says in non-rural areas. In the report, Professor Lang, Dr. Lang defines non-rural areas as those having populations of less than 850 people per square mile. The town of Richmond has less than 200 people per square mile. So it is obviously, based on the statistics from this report, a rural area. If you go through the report in other places, and again, it's not my report, it's Dr. Lang's, but in my review from both reading the report, listening to his webinar, and personally speaking to Dr. Lang, he talks about that it's better that it goes on the areas that have already been not impacted, have been cleared, i.e. farmland, as similar to what we're talking about here. My opinion that it's right here in the report. Rural areas have smaller and statistically insignificant effects on prices. If you're talking about putting this in a suburban area, heavily developed, not urban, but heavily developed suburban area, that's where the questions come in about impact of value, and that's where he focuses on. On rural areas, again, he states it clearly that there is no insignificant impact on prices.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Mancini, if I may.
Absolutely, Daniel.
Mr. Mancini, you in your previous speech, you seem to make much of the word within. And I'm looking at Merriam-Webster for the word system, and the definition there is consistent with what Mr. Brown was testifying to. If we would understand the use then in the ordinance. Regularly interacting or interdependent group of items forming a unified whole is a system, and then it gives various examples in different.
Mr. Josper, could you repeat what you just read from?
Yes, it's the Merriam-Webster current edition.
Could you repeat the sentence for me, please?
Yes, defines a system as a regularly interacting or interdependent group of items forming a unified whole. And it seems to me that Mr. Brown's position was taken upon that understanding of what a system is, the whole. And so a system, the whole, to be within. I'm also looking at Merriam-Webster, which is cited elsewhere in your documentation. I recognize this language. Just to be forthright, I'm an exegete. I'm a pastor. I deal with language day in and day out. It's part and parcel of what I do, to exegete words. And I'm not comfortable with the way you're using the word within. And it's the question is, I believe in the use in the ordinance. It's used as a preposition. And if that's the case, Merriam-Webster says used as a function word to indicate enclosure or containment. And that's with the system. I think that the ordinance is, and as Mr. Brown interpreted it in his decision, seems to be consistent with both those words. I've read the materials that you were supplied by the applicant, I guess by you and Green, was a Green Development. And mine's all marked up. I'm not a lawyer, but I think like a lawyer, and I have take a lot of exceptions to the language that's in the testimony, in the documents provided. And I know that in matters of law, it a lot of times hangs on the words and sometimes one word. And I think that's really where we find ourselves. So I'm just engaging with you and what you testified to. And it's, I think, something the board will have to grapple with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can respond through the chair very quickly. Importantly, it's not I that's testifying. It's Mr. Brown's testimony. And it's Mr. Brown's interpretation. And I think what we heard from Mr. Brown is that the word within was inconsequential, which you seem to agree with. And that's where I take issue. The question not only lies sometimes with the meaning of the words, but the presence of the words and the use of the words. Here, the town council chose to incorporate the word within, and that has significant meaning. Had the council not used the word within, if they had simply said that the solar energy system shall be located 2 miles from a utility substation, that would have a different meaning, in my opinion. But by the use of the word within, and then taking into consideration the definition of within, there is no clear understanding here that the entire system has to be 2 miles from the substation. Rather, I think what this sentence says and what you would see in practical exercise is that any portion of the system, if within 200 feet, within 2 miles, is deemed acceptable. And I think the council accepted that when they later amended that. The statute, in the council's opinion, was not clear, because had it been, it would not need to have gone through the process. And it is a process, as you're aware, which requires a recommendation from the planning board, 3 weeks consecutive notice, a reading, first reading, and then a vote by the town council to add the language, which they did, which says that which reads that the entire lot on which the solar energy system is located shall be within a 2 mile radius, or 2 miles of the utility substation. And then I referenced the example notice. Notice is another particularly important provision of your ordinances, which uses the word within. And that has always had a particular meaning with notice. And as the board can take notice of, that if a portion of the parcel falls within that radius, the entire parcel that counts. We could take the interpretation that we're not going to give person A notice because the entire lot is not within the 200-foot radius, but rather only a portion. And if we did that, then the determination from Mr. Brown would be that our notice was deficient and our application was flawed and not permitted to proceed. So to me, that's a double standard. That's the point that was being made. Obviously, we can have different opinions. That's what it's about. But I think that the error here was not paying particular attention to the word within and deciding to consider that word to be inconsequential. And I don't think that the word is inconsequential because the council used it and used it with particular meaning. They may not have known what that meant, but it's irrelevant. It exists and the applicant is entitled to rely on it, which it did. And this application is subject to that sentence, which is what the standard is for this board to review. And that is our argument, and it's incorporated in our Exhibit 6 to our application and petition.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just respond on behalf of the town.
Yes, please.
I think there's a definite distinction between a solar energy system and title to real estate. When the ordinance requires notice to title holders within 200 feet of a particular piece of property, you own title to every square inch of your property. That's why notice has to be given whether your whole lot is within 200 feet or whether a portion of your lot is within 200 feet, because you own every square inch of that. Regarding this solar energy system, that does not necessarily have to encompass every square inch of your property. And I know we were getting into Webster's definition of a system, but the system itself is defined in the statute, in the ordinance, by section 1834.0, which states specifically a solar energy system consists of a ground-mounted solar panel array and its associated structures and components. That's what we're dealing with. So the argument that title to real estate is and within is equivalent to within in the meaning of a solar array is not really an apples to apples comparison.
Mr. Vice Chairman, is it appropriate for me to ask Mr. Cozzolino? I think
Yes.
that's seen that right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Please
You're
do,
the
Dave.
solicitor. You're the solicitor for the town, and so I suspect you were involved when they changed the ordinance. And I understand that we're dealing with the ordinance prior to 15 May of 18. But when I look at the change that was made, I don't think it goes to the heart of what's being argued in the previous rendition, because when the town changed it, they didn't say the entire energy system must be located within. That's left untouched. It says the entire lot, which deals with the real estate and not the system. They have not modified the system. And so it seems to me that the town's understanding the system, what they really have expanded so that they're saying the whole property, and they've left the idea of the system, which is defined as you just read it, as it was. Is that my understanding that correctly?
That's correct. I mean, Council Ellsworth was involved with the ordinance part of it, but I would concur that the amendment focuses on the land, on the lot. The original ordinance focuses on the system, because the system doesn't change. The definition is exactly the same in the two ordinances. The only change is the focus on the entire lot in the new ordinance as opposed to the system in the old ordinance. Hey, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, on that.
Mr. Vice Chairman, that's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Jeff?
Yes, Karen.
There were two other new pieces of material that were introduced by the applicant. And they were both the subject of a lot of questions at the last part of the public hearing. One of those was the revised landscaping plan, and the other was specific information about the noise levels at different points on the lot. The noise that would be generated by the solar energy system. It might be a good idea for you to just ask the board members if they have any specific questions about either one of those packets of material, as long as Mr. Mancini has his witnesses available and we're still in public hearing. Because later it will be too late to ask.
Understood. Did everyone have a chance to review the documents presented, and do we have any questions pertaining to them?
This is Daniel Jarstfer. I found the materials to be self-explanatory. I don't have any additional questions.
John Carney, I concur with Daniel.
Chelsea Bainter, I don't have any questions.
Excellent. Lindsay?
Lindsay Hannon, I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. All right.
So, Jeff, ordinarily the next thing that you would do would be to ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor or against the application. I can't see the participant list because we're using the webinar format and not the regular Zoom meeting format. But if Kelly Fracassa is on the call, I suggest that you call on him first. The reason is that this case has previously already been to Superior Court, and he is representing an abutter in that case. So he is technically a party in this case, unlike other members of the public who might like to speak. And he might want to make an argument or put on testimony. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him, but that might be the first thing that you want to find out when you ask for a public comment.
Who's controlling that list? Is that Sean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kelly Fracassa on the call?
Kelly Fracassa is on the call.
Okay.
So if you do want to call to, if you do want to, pull him into a panelist, you just let me
Yes,
know.
I would recommend that you make him a panelist.
We're going to move this to a public? The general public, do we have to make a motion or anything of that nature, or we just start introducing people?
No, you don't have to make a motion,
Very good.
but you
Well,
might want to just hear from Kelly, see what he has to say first before you ask for other comment from other abutters.
all right. Well, Sean, let's get Kelly, if we can.
Okay, one moment. Okay, Kelly is entering in as a panelist. And he should be in now.
There we go.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Hi, Kelly.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How is everyone? I represent John Pacino, who is lives within 200 feet of this property. And I submitted a memorandum. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. My argument is basically on a par with Mike Cozzolino's, but it is a little bit different. And I also respectfully disagree with John Mancini's argument, which he's laid out in his memorandum. Just first and foremost, the interpretation of a zoning ordinance, which is probably the big issue here, is a pure question of law. What somebody's opinion of what it means is not evidence. It's not evidence that would ever be admitted in court. The board's task here, as basically sort of like the judges of this, is to interpret and apply the language of the ordinance. And that's basically what I'm going to be talking about here. Now, we've talked about it a lot tonight. And the applicable language is solar energy system shall be located within 2 miles of a utility substation. Now, when we interpret ordinances, especially in a court, and the same rules that apply in a court apply to your construction of this ordinance as well. And one thing I do agree with Mr. Mancini is that the definitions of solar energy system and the definitions of within are key. Solar energy system has a definition which is incorporated in the ordinance, and therefore that definition controls. And as laid out in my memorandum, and I believe discussed by Mr. Jarsfer, solar energy system is a unitary thing. And therefore that unitary thing must be, quote unquote, within the 2 mile radius of a utility substation. Within is not defined in the ordinance. And so as people have noted, what the courts will tell you is you utilize the plain and ordinary meaning of within. And when the courts do that, they will typically go to a dictionary. So when everybody's been talking about Merriam-Webster, that's where you would go. And it looks like everybody here has looked at the Merriam-Webster definition. And it's got several definitions. And John is hanging his hat on one, and I'm hanging my hat on another. And its context is key as to which one is going to apply here. And just noting the definition, within means in or into the interior of or inside, a function word to indicate enclosure or containment. And because a solar energy system is a unitary thing, that unitary thing must be inside that 2 mile radius. Now, I don't know if we've had the, I think it's C1.4 on the screen. I have it ready. If I'm able to share the screen, I can take a look at it, because I think some things have been said tonight that the portion of the system which lies within, in other words, inside the 2 mile radius, would be perfectly fine. I disagree, because the system here, and I'll try to do the shared screen here. Hopefully you see on the screen here, sheet C1.4. And my cursor here, the little, well, it's not looking at, but if you can see it here, there's the radius. That's the dotted line there. However, the system here is just as all of these panels here, the vast majority of which lie north of the 2 mile radius line. That's the whole system. Under this particular ordinance, if you had a portion of this, or rather, if this whole system existed south of the line, it would be perfectly fine under the ordinance as it existed, I believe, in 2017. But it doesn't. Because this system, the entire thing here, does not lie within, i.e. inside this 2 mile radius here, it violates that particular ordinance, and for that reason alone, the project cannot pass muster. Now, of course, I don't know how to get out of this. Let me see. I'll tell you what, I'm not even going to try right now. There we go. Now, John has talked about it's section 452453 of the general laws, which requires notice to go to property owners within a 200-foot radius of the property. Now, again, context is key. If we're talking in that particular context, because we're talking about notice, and that statute is certainly going to be interpreted expansively to ensure that everybody gets notice, then within is going to mean in or into the range of, like within reach or within sight. That's the other dictionary definition of within. But we're talking here within a solar energy system. We're talking a physical thing. Notice under 452453 is quite a different animal. So I don't believe that the analogy applies. One other thing which John mentioned, and it's just a part that he mentioned in his latest memorandum. He stated that the ordinance, the 2017 ordinance, is simply and plainly written. And I agree with that. And if that's the case, you apply the plain language of the ordinance. However, he also states on page 3 of his November 25th memorandum that there's a long-standing principle that any doubts and ambiguities must be resolved in favor of the landowner. And that principle is correct. However, because this ordinance is plain and unambiguous, that principle, which applies only when dealing with an ambiguous ordinance, doesn't apply here. So there are two contradictory arguments in his memorandum of law. Now, there's one other thing which he mentions, and it's on page 4 of his memorandum, is that he mentions the fact that the town has amended the ordinance and did so in 2018. And I'm just going to go up here to go back to it. And it reads that the entire lot on which the solar energy system is located shall be within the 2-mile radius of the utility substation. And if I remember correctly, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but it seems that, or there has been opinions that those the 2017 and 2018 ordinances basically mean the same thing. They do not. They are two completely different animals. The entire lot has to be within the radius, whereas in 2017, only the system itself. Now, if the system in this particular property was tucked into a little corner that was within the 2-mile radius, it would be perfectly fine. Under the 2018 version, it would not. So there are substantive differences there. But one argument which I hope I'm not getting John wrong here, which he may be making, is that the town council amended it because it didn't feel that the 2017 ordinance was clear enough, that it wanted to amend it to make sure that the whole property was within it. I disagree with that. And I don't think that you can read that into, you can't read that into the 2018 ordinance, because and this is what a lot of people do in these things, is that's basically speculating as to what the council meant. Legislative history is something which you look at only if the ordinance or the statute is ambiguous, and you can't interpret it any other way other than to go back to see what the legislators have actually said about the particular enactment that they passed. You really don't have that here. I looked at the council hearing where this was enacted. The town council said very, very little about what this meant. So basically, we go back to what a court would do. And again, what you have to do when interpreting this. You interpret it according to its plain language. And because we have two key, the key phrase, solar energy system, and the key word within, and because in this context, within is clearly going to mean inside of, in other words, the whole unitary thing has to be inside of this 2-mile radius. That's the only way that it can be interpreted here. And because of that, and because the entire system here is not incorporated within that 2-mile radius, the entire application fails. That's basically all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions from the board for this particular presentation? Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Sean, shall we continue?
I make a motion, we open it for public discussion.
You don't need to make a motion to do that. You just automatically do that. You just ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor or against the application.
If we have anyone that would like to speak in favor or against, I guess on the application, I guess we can, what is there, a raise your hand situation?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, I can see a number of hands that are being raised on the panelist, the attendee list right now. At the board's pleasure, I'll add each individual as a panelist one at a time.
Okay.
So Roberta Engel is going to be added into a panelist. She is being added right now.
You should also remind each person who is going to testify that they should state their name and spell their name for the stenographer, and they have to be placed under oath.
Roberta Engel, Engel.
Roberta, raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm coming to you as a citizen of Richmond. And as Councillor Jarst mentioned at one of the meetings about the fact that he bikes on Beaver River Road. It's my bicycle rides from Hillsdale down Beaver River Road is what brought me to this meeting. You're considering this for the town. Please frame your consideration for this project with the town's goals, values, to maintain scenic vistas, to protect the town's heritage in mind. I've got 5 points I'd like to share. One, Richmond is rural and it prides itself on its rural nature. The townspeople value our rural nature so much that we have the Richmond Rural Preservation Land Trust in addition to the Conservation Commission. So please consider keeping our agricultural lands for agriculture. Contrary to comments made on Green's behalf, according to website for DEM, new and experienced farmers need agricultural land. In fact, DEM states, quote, the Division of Agriculture and our partners have identified improving access to farmland as a major priority and notes, quote, lack of access to affordable farmland threatens Rhode Island's agricultural sector. So again, please consider keeping our agricultural lands for agriculture. 3, contrary to comments made on Green's behalf, farming is economically feasible. Probably about a month ago, Wicked Tulips, a growing Rhode Island tradition, recently sent out an email saying, we're expanding 2 UPIC locations for 2021. New farm in Exeter, located on Hog Hill House Road. We planted 5 acres of early to mid-spring blooming tulips on this beautiful farm. What a shame the email doesn't say Richmond. Why not sustain our agricultural heritage and bring in the money for shopkeepers when visitors flock to the tulip fields each spring? Again, please keep our agricultural lands for agriculture. 4, put solar panels in the right place. Harvest solar energy from the rooftops of Stop and Shop, Job Lot, Ace Hardware, CVS, and on.
Ma'am,
sorry?
I know you're reading very quickly and I'm trying to write as fast as I can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were taking all my words.
Every single one of them.
Sorry.
So I'm going to go back to harvest solar energy from the rooftops, and that's where I ended.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Of Stop and Shop, Job Lot, Ace Hardware, put industrial solar panels in industrial zones, put residential panels on residential rooftops. 5, we heard from Green's experts that at the last meeting that in 2 years from 2018 to 2020, the technology has changed so much that acreage has decreased from 23 to 18 acres. It makes me wonder how long will it be before the panels occupying agricultural lands for 25 years, possibly more, will become an outdated technology. So please, again, consider agricultural lands for agriculture. Thank you for your time. Apologize for that. I'm nervous.
That's okay.
It's okay. Thank you, Roberta. All right, so continuing on, anybody have any questions or comments for this, for Roberta? If not, we can move along to our next interested party. Sean?
Vice Chair, the next person I'm going to bring into the panel is Daryl Bissonette. And Daryl is being added into as a panelist right now and should be joining momentarily. And it looks like they're here.
Good evening.
He's muted.
Oh, we've been following this right from the start. I think we've missed.
Excuse me, you need to state your name and then you need to be sworn in as a witness.
Sure. Kim Bissonette, B as in Boston, ISSONNETTE. And Kim, KIM.
Is your name Kim?
It is.
Okay. I have to see up here Daryl. Is there a Daryl with you?
That's my wife. She's right here.
My computer.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I said, we've been following this since its inception, and I think we've missed 2 meetings, and one of which we found out later was continued. So we've really kind of kept up on this. And it was glad to hear testimony representing an abutter, because we're abutters. And we want to go on record as opposing this for all of the reasons that have been stated through the last couple of years. You know, we've heard about fences for small animals, but we see deer and turkey on that property all the time. What about the big animals? You know, we've heard about the containments for the transformers with oil and, you know, again, the Titanic was indestructible. I mean, things are going to happen. One of our concerns is that our well is between our property and the Beaver River. And obviously, if there's something happened to that property, the river is going to be in danger, but it'll be catastrophic to us. And obviously, being in a butter, it causes us great concern. We've heard a lot of testimony about sight lines. I travel Beaver River Road 3 times a week, maybe 4. And it takes me between 45 and 60 seconds to do it each way. And again, we are not in favor of the project. But in theory, that's 2 minutes where I should be focusing on the road. Well, our property, and I have pictures, but I don't know if it would represent well. We look at the property 24/7. And you can say, well, when you're driving Beaver River, you look across the way and there are big oaks and big pines, and that's true. But that doesn't mean that we don't have sight lines to the property. And I can tell you this with great certainty, that if the project was up and running, we wouldn't have bought this house. And we would have considered this our last home. In April, it will have been here 4 years. We love the community. We love everything about it. And we probably would not be living here if that project was there. And the last thing I want to bring up is property values, because, you know, we've heard testimony. We heard it once at the junior high, probably 1.5 years ago, don't quote me on that, citing studies from the Midwest. Well, if you know anything about studies, the only relevance they have are to the sample population that they're based on. So in November, we heard about Dr. Lang's study, which brought Rhode Island and Massachusetts into the equation. And we heard it again in December. And my concern is, our concern is that the zoning board's takeaway on that is that there's no impact. And I have to respectfully disagree. I took it upon myself to reach out to Dr. Lang myself. I sent him an email and I posed the question to him. We are abutters. The title of your study could impact 7%. And I want to know from you, from the horse's mouth, does your research, does your paper, and in your opinion, is it 0 or is it 7? It's that simple. And I'd like to read some of a sidebar here that I did reach out to him again saying, look, your study has been cited as supporting documentation for 0 impact. Are you okay? And again, that's public record. He published the paper. I wasn't quite sure what the domain of an email was, what was appropriate and what wasn't. So I actually reached out to him again and said, do you mind if I use some of the emails of our discussion? And he said, I went back and reread it. I'm comfortable with what I said. Go ahead. So,
Mr. Bissonette, I'm going to have to interrupt you. The board cannot consider as evidence anything that you read from an email that you received from Dr. Lang, because that's hearsay testimony. He would have to be here himself to testify.
okay, so I can't say anything about what he said?
No, I'm sorry, you can't.
Well, I will say this, that to summarize, it's a contradictory statement to what you've heard about property values. And I think my takeaway from talking to him is, the reality is we don't know. We really don't know about specific sites, specific locations, about what the property values would mean. And for us, if it was 7%, that's in excess of $25,000 based on property values around here. Well, would any one of you want to gamble with $25,000 plus on your property value? And I think I know the answer to that. So this is a real world problem for us, a real world issue for us. And again, we're not opposed to alternative energy. We're opposed to that site because it has a direct impact on our biggest investment. So that's a big concern. So thank you for allowing us to share some thoughts.
Thank you, Kim. Sean, if there's no questions from the board for this particular witness, and continue.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. The next person I'm going to bring into the panelist is Gina Thurn. And Gina is joining us now. And just as a reminder, of course, you have to unmute yourself when you become a panelist.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you have to state your name, spell it for the stenographer, and wait for the stenographer to swear you in as a witness.
My name is Gina Thurn, Thurn.
Wait, can you show me your screen, please?
How do I do that? Oh, wait, hang on. Do you have it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Gina Thurn. I live on Gardner Road in Exeter and Richmond. The Richmond-Exeter town line runs right through my property. I am a full-time farmer. I am here tonight to support the proposed solar array on the Beaver River Road property owned by the Stamp family. Solar arrays have their good and their bad points. To some, solar arrays represent a loss of scenic vista that they have become accustomed to enjoying without the associated work and expense that makes that scenic vista available to them. Personally, I would much rather look at solar panels than another housing development. But at any rate, they will be screened and buffered with vegetation as per town ordinance. Arrays may also represent a perceived loss of valuable farmland to agriculture. Despite the fact that research being conducted at the University of Massachusetts, University of Vermont, University of Arizona, as well as in Germany and Japan, and right in Richmond, Rhode Island, under the solar array on my property, that prove that it is very viable to grow crops under solar panels, in the row space between the panels, and on the fence line surrounding the array. These studies negate the argument that solar arrays automatically pull farmland out of production. As space becomes tighter, dual cropping the land with both solar and agriculture will become a necessity. Solar arrays represent a valuable source of renewable energy, reduce our long-term carbon footprint, and are safer for the environment than natural gas, coal, oil, or nuclear power. To farmers, solar arrays represent a lifeline. They are a valuable source of income that allow these people to maintain the land they have worked so hard for to be passed on to future generations, not just sold off to the highest bidder. I come from a family of farmers. Unfortunately, farming does not always take a direct lineage. In my case, it skipped a generation. None of my grandfather's immediate heirs had the desire to continue farming or the financial resources to maintain the land. As taxes increased and residential zoning changed the tax structure so that the land was taxed at highest and best used values, the farm was sold and today is in its end crop, house lots. Had a solar array been on that farm to provide the family with a source of income, maybe I'd be farming in New York instead of Rhode Island. So finally, solar arrays are placeholders. They do not have to be permanent, and they buy farm owners time for the next generation to come of age, time to pass on their love of farming to their children and their grandchildren, time to prime the pump for the next generation of farmers. The best way to keep farmland in farming is to make it possible and profitable to be a farmer. Solar arrays do that. They make it possible to maintain the land and the infrastructure. Many people have stated that solar arrays in a residential neighborhood undermine the rural character of the town, thus going against the comprehensive plan. However, they forget that farms were running businesses in those areas long before they were designated residential. It is the farms that created this rural character in the first place. In order for a farm to stay viable, it needs to be able to make financial decisions to support the business. Adding a solar array to a farm is one such decision. Your own comprehensive plan states that you want farms to remain in the town of Richmond. Specifically on page 36 of your comprehensive plan, policy NC5. It reads, encourage the active use of prime farmlands for farming. Incorporate into zoning ordinances and regulations policies that are designed to sustain agricultural operations and preserve open space. Yet, in continually making decisions that force farms out of business, you force the land to be sold for house lots, destroying the rural character of the town. While your intention may be to preserve farms, remember that preserved things are dead. We are not pickles in a jar, and we are not artifacts in a museum. We are farmers trying to make an honest living in the best way that we can. Farms need to be able to change with the times and the technology. They cannot exist and function the way they did 100 years ago and still remain viable. If not with solar, what about wind? A wind turbine would certainly fit in the small section of that lot that's within the 2-mile radius. The best way to meet the goal of your comprehensive plan to save farms is to keep farms viable, relevant, and current. Approving this solar array is one way to do that. It's the right thing to do for the Stamp family, for the environment, and for the town of Richmond. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. If there's no questions for this presenter, Sean, would you please bring in our next speaker?
Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. The next person is Gail Tibbetts. So I will be moving her in as a panelist. And Gail's with us.
Hi, Gail Tibbetts. Can you see me?
Mary Ellen, you're muted.
I'm doing that because my dog is making a lot of noise. So I'm trying to get, she's just giving me a hard time. She's spoiled. Yeah. Gail, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me?
Okay. Could you just put on your video, please? Down the bottom, if there's a little button there, there you go, there you go. Raise your right hand for me, Gail. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gail Tibbetts. My husband Andy's also here tonight, but he's off camera. We live at 165 Beaver River Road. If you're not familiar with this address, it sits directly across from the proposed Stamp Farm solar installation at 172 Beaver River. Actually, Stamp Farm surrounds our property. We're at ground zero. A while back, we measured from the easternmost wall of our house, the side closest to the road, to the inside of the tree line in Stamp's field, and it was a mere 40 feet. 40 feet. Even with the setbacks, we'll be on top of it. I'd be willing to bet that no one here tonight would want to live that close to a commercial solar power plant. Dr. Corey Lang's study for URI has shown that housing values declined 1.7% within a mile of the commercial solar arrays, and within 1/10 of a mile, it's 7%. What would 40 feet be? Oh, it's been said that he didn't find a reduction in these rural areas, but this wasn't proven. In his conclusion, he stated that although he was an advocate for renewable energy, the risks outweighed the rewards at this time when citing commercial arrays in residential areas. A little background information on us. My husband's late grandfather, Stephen Dunk Wheeler, bought this farm in 1925 and raised his family and operated a dairy farm on the property for many years. When he became too old to run the farm any longer, it was sold after he carved out a parcel of about 3/4 of an acre around the original farmhouse, where he continued to live until 1980. At that time, my husband bought the property, and after we were married in 1982, we raised our family on the family homestead. This farm has been part of our family history for 96 years. And if Dunk could see what's going on here tonight, he would spin in his grave. This valley has a rich historical value, so much so that when the Richmond Historical Society and the Richmond Bicentennial Commission published a book on this town's history in 1977 titled Driftways into the Past, there was an entire chapter dedicated to the Beaver River Valley, written by our neighbor and former school teacher Sally Hoyle, as told to her by her father-in-law Henry Hoyle. It details the farms along Beaver River Road in the late 1800s and how family and travelers who passed down the road were expected to open and close gates between these farms as they passed along the driftway. Our house is specifically mentioned in this book as being owned by the James family, and it's called Jamesford. In approximately 1986 or 87, the town asked residents who owned old homes in the town to research as far back as we could, and the town would issue a plaque that dated these homes and register them with the town. I spent many hours at the town hall with a toddler and an infant to find out that our house is possibly one of the oldest houses in town. Although I couldn't trace it all the way back, the deeds before 1812 due to fire that apparently wiped out a lot of records, I did learn that our house likely dates back to the mid-1700s based on its architecture. The property boundaries are in the original town map when it was incorporated in 1747. We have a plaque that names Jeremiah Northup as the owner in 1812. The town obviously valued the history of this area back in 1987, so I'm asking you to consider its value again. I also have a book entitled Rhode Island, A Scenic Discovery, published in 1976 that chronicles the state in pictures. This book shows the Beaver River Valley in at least 3 beautiful photos, one of which was used by the state of Rhode Island in a tourism campaign on a poster back in the early 80s showing an old farmer driving his carriage within sight of our house. Again, this area was valued for its beauty and was used to attract people to our state. If you allow this solar installation to be built in this valley, you're destroying the cultural and history nature of this area. There'll be nothing left to brag about this valley. There are places to build these commercial power plants, and a rural historic residential area is not it. The town has changed the zoning to prohibit solar in R3 zones going forward. So I beg you not to allow this one just because it was applied for prior to the change. It's obvious that our town leaders don't feel that it's appropriate place for this type of commercial solar array in any future plans. I hear the term solar farms used to describe these developments, but I refuse to call these industrial sites farms because there's nothing agricultural about them. Nothing about them relates to farming, and anyone who's ever been part of the farming life will not be fooled by developers calling them solar farms. We are not stupid. My husband and I are retired. If this project's allowed to move forward, our property won't be worth a thing. No one would ever want to buy our house if we were to sell it to downsize. We've worked our entire whole lives to enjoy our retirement, and now we'll be looking out a window to see that ugly mess. I heard testimony that at the last meeting that we would not see the solar array from our second floor window. I'd like to know which of these people have been in my upstairs bedroom, because I don't think any of them have. I sent photos to the town taken from that window that shows just what we can see. We can see almost back to the far edge of the field. I also heard testimony that the array would not be seen from the road and would not affect the character of the valley. This is ridiculous. Do you think we're that dumb? There are a lot of discussion about the vegetation view block that would be planted. I'd like to see a photo of similar plantings that Green has installed anywhere in the area. I can bet there isn't one. The only one thing that surrounds the arrays that I've seen are ugly chain link fences and some sad looking arborvitae. What would the height be of the planting on the day of installation? If we have to wait 20 years for them to grow, then it defeats the purpose. By that time, it'll be time to decommission. And here's a thought on that. I'm 65 now. In 25 years, when it's time to remove this monstrosity, I'll be 90. So this is essentially a life sentence for us. It was also said that there'd be no view block on the north end of the property because there are trees to block the view. I also provided photos to the town showing that you can clearly see through those trees in both directions. As a matter of fact, I worked from home all summer and I could see all the equipment in the turf field from my dining room window. There's no view block at all. And now at the last meeting, they admitted that there'll be a constant hum emitting from the conversion unit. So not only will we be seeing this every day, we'll be hearing it too. There's been a lot of promises and assurances from so-called experts paid by Green for their testimony, and I don't believe them. And neither should you, ladies and gentlemen. They will say anything and promise anything to pass a project. And I have a few examples of this that were provided to me prior to the last meeting. And I'm reading from another sheet here that says, this application should be denied because a developer cannot be trusted to keep promises. Green Development has a record of non-compliance with approved plans, and the town does not have the capability to enforce compliances. For example, 421 Kingstown Road, John and Cindy Duncan's farm in Richmond. Green Development did not follow the approved plan in preparing the site. It put boulders as barriers rather than wooded buffer. The silt fence required to control erosion was buried by sediment carried off from the site. Neither the sediment traps nor the temporary swales were constructed in accordance with the approved site plan. When the neighbor whose land was flooded turned to the town for help, it sent it to DEM, and DEM ordered a cleanup and restoration. At 394 Cars Trail and 5641 Flat River Road in Coventry, in pursuing its application for a 5 megawatt solar array, Green Development indicated that it would also build a therapy farm for people with special needs on the site. The therapy farm has never been built. Approval for the solar array was denied, but Green Development began construction for the array anyway, causing the town to issue a cease and desist order. DEM assessed a fine of $40,000 for damage to freshwater wetlands on the site. And 10 1.5 megawatt wind turbines in Coventry. The town issued notices of violation against 3 turbines for violating shadow flicker limits set in the special permit. Green Development sued, but the court found the notices were proper. The installation also received a notice of violation from DEM for unauthorized alteration of wetlands. So you see, they have plenty of history of promises not kept. My husband, Andy, has a chronic illness that is aggravated by stress, and I can't think of anything more stressful than watching our neighborhood be destroyed by greedy people who don't even live in this town. Neither the developer nor the landowner lives in Richmond, so why should they care what happens to us? The Stamps and Green Development do not care about anything but their pocketbooks, and they will destroy our way of life for a profit. I'm asking you to consider the residents of this town and all the people who will be affected, and not the corporate thugs who think that we're too weak to fight back. Don't allow the Stamp Farm solar project to invade Beaver River Valley. Keep Richmond rural. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Any questions for Gail from the board members? Have a good evening, Gail.
Thank you.
Sean, who do we have next?
Next, we have Ellen Kinsley. I'll be adding him as a panelist. And Ellen should be with us right now.
Good evening. How are you?
Excellent.
Mr. Kinsley, could you put your video on, please? Thank you. Raise your right hand for me, sir. And is there any way you can get closer to the microphone? Thank you. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Good evening, Alan.
Good evening. How are you tonight? My name is Alan Kinsley. I am the owner of 71 Beaver River Road, the Lazy K Ranch Alpaca Farm, and managing partner of South County Farmers Market. And I would like to speak on behalf and rebut the woman named Gina's assertion that solar is good for farmers. I'm an active farmer. I'm a new farmer. One of the biggest problems I had with starting with a farm was finding land. You can't build new land. You can't grow water. The Beaver River Aquifer is the cleanest freshwater source in all of Rhode Island. And we are entrusting Green Energy to be a good steward of this for us. And if you simply Google Green Energy North Kingstown, Rhode Island, and DEM violations, you're going to find a laundry list of ways they've violated buffers, wetlands, all sorts of different open space and farmland violations. So I was the USDA's Southern Rhode Island Conservation District's Conservation Farm of the Year for 2019. And I would like to say there's nothing green about green energy. There's nothing green about using the site to generate 5.2 megawatts of power. That's paltry for what you're taking away from this community. There's no way to get this back once it's gone. It's gone forever. There are plenty of farmers out there actively pursuing open space to farm in. Green energy is already, using litigious language and threatening that if they can't get their way, they're going to go and just build houses. I mean, we're about to grant them a special use permit, and I believe a special use permit should be special. You should have to be privileged and in the right position to be using it. And Green Energy has shown time and time again that they violate wetland buffers. They have no regard for open space. They have no vested interest in our community. And they have already, from evidence of Heaton Orchard Road, there's still runoff every time it rains, even after they put those ugly boulders, which are supposed to mitigate the floodwaters. They've made promises to us before that have turned out to be untrue. And there's no reason that we as residents of Richmond need to be giving up our open space for a company to come and profit off of it. Again, I just have to reinforce that once this open space is gone, it's gone forever. In 25 years, when solar panels have been deemed toxic waste and their $2,500 deposit to dispose of it turns into a $50,000 bill, the town of Richmond's going to be on the hook for that. So I just, as a farmer, as a new farmer, as someone who would love more farmland, there is just, I am completely against this project. Living on Beaver River Road, I am completely against this project. And as a resident of Rhode Island, looking at the track record of Green Energy, I'm completely against them doing any further business in our town for their complete lack of respect for any environmental laws. That's really all I have to say tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Any of the board members have any questions or for Alan? All right, if not, Sean, let's move along to our next individual. Have a good evening, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The next individual that I'm moving into a panelist is James Borsick. And James is being added now as a panelist.
Hello.
Good evening, James.
Good evening. How are you?
Mr. Borsick, raise your right hand for me, sir. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say I am totally against the solar arrays. In addition to what Dr. Brown said, which is kind of, in my view, made it cut and dried that they're not within the law. When they were talking, when the representative was talking about Dr. Lang's report not significantly impacting, I just for reference, I'm a little nervous, sorry. I live, as a crow flies, approximately a quarter of a mile from the site on Shannock Hill Road. And we heard the figures of 1.7 to 7% devaluation up to a mile. But also what this report from Dr. Lang says that I'm reading a copy of, when a farm or forest is developed into solar and there is a scarcity of that type of land in the area, you get a double negative. You lose the farm and forest amenities that are highly valued, and you get the disamenities of a solar development, Lang explained. Losing the natural area and replacing it with something industrial is where the biggest negatives arise. In those circumstances, the researchers found that the housing prices within a mile of the solar installation declined by 5%. By calculating the value of the reduction in carbon emissions from the solar installation and comparing it to the loss of housing value due to the installation, Lang said the benefits of the solar energy installations are outweighed by the cost to the nearby property owners. So I know they conveniently neglected to bring that up to you, so I thought that the residents should bring that up to you. That's all monetary, but we live here, we love seeing the rural area, and when you go down Heaton Orchard Road and you see where it looks like a war zone on the, I guess it would be the east side of the solar array, that looks like a bomb went off in there. So what are they going to do when they put this so-called berm up? And as I believe it was Mrs. Tibbet said, if you're coming down Beaver River, where the trees go east to west to the river, there's at least 50 feet in between those trees. So you're going to see all of those arrays going north to south on Beaver River Road, and you're going to see them going southbound coming in. And just the fact that Dr. Brown pointed out that if any portion is not within the 2 miles, then it's against the law. So I hope you'll take that all into consideration. And I was very happy to hear that the valley is being considered for National Historic Designation. And you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that if these arrays go in, that would probably destroy any chance of us getting that designation. So please keep us as a beautiful area that we live in, protect the river, protect our aquifer. All of our water comes from that. And as you know, we have wonderful water here. So I guess that's all I have to say. And I appreciate your time. And I hope you'll take all that into account.
Thank you, James. Sean, who do we have up for our next participant?
Vice Chair, the next individual I'm pulling in is Graham Bell. And Graham is being promoted to panelist. and should be joining us now.
Unmute. Have you got me now?
Is it okay to say, can you hear me, Mr. Bell?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Wonderful.
I can hear you now. I'm ready to swear in.
Mary Ellen, you're muted again.
Hard time. Sorry, guys.
It's that dog.
She's just, I don't know what's going on with her. Maybe I just need a 2-minute break after this gentleman speaks just to control this.
So my name is Graham Bell. That's Graham, last name Bell, 162 Shannock Hill Road.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
So my wife and I built our house up on Shannock Hill in 1988. So it's 32 years ago. And her ashes are buried up here. And we've just loved living here. I've kept a flock of sheep up on the top of the hill for quite a while. And just to give you a little background, my training was from the Royal College of Agriculture in Cirencester in England in general agriculture and farm management. And when I first came to this country, I worked as a farm management extension agent for the Pennsylvania Extension Service. So there are a lot of people have said very good things this evening, and I'm going to zero in very quickly to a zoning issue. But just generally, as I've been involved in this discussion over the last 2 or 3 years, I learned about the comprehensive community plan. I learned that 95% of people who were answering questions about what they most enjoyed about the town, the rural nature of the town was the most important thing for 95% of the people that live here. So this is our town. We're dealing with an issue that is going to really destroy an essential part of our town. And we put it in our comprehensive community plan, and the roads are named: Shannock Hill Road, Beaver River Road, North Road. I think maybe Lewiston Avenue is also in there. This is the heart of rural Richmond that we're about to destroy. Now, I have had a relationship with Mr. Stamp for 32 years, on and off. I asked him if I could go goose shooting down there or dove hunting, and he very nicely let me do that. I have nothing against Mr. Stamp. He farmed his sweet corn there, and over the past few years, or 2 or 3 years ago, he was hit with corn earworm, which made his crop unmarketable. So he lost his contract with Super Stop and Shop. And so all of a sudden, you know, he didn't have an outlet for that crop. And at the same time, the solar energy people came along and offered all of this money. Mr. Stamp doesn't live here. He lives way up north somewhere. His son said at one of our meetings that when he was asked, well, you know, why don't you put the solar energy field up in some of your land up in more urban areas? And he said, well, it's worth more up there for urban development. So I just feel that we're townspeople fighting the outsiders to keep our town the way it is. I understand this is a zoning board meeting, so what I'm going to talk about now is a zoning issue specifically, and I'll read it. The proposed solar array will have a significant adverse impact on prime agricultural soils. The property at 172 Beaver River Road is part of Richmond's Agricultural Overlay District, Section 18.12.020 of the Richmond Code of Ordinances defines the purpose of the agricultural overlay district as protecting large contiguous areas of prime agricultural soils and reserving such areas for farming. The establishment of a solar array on this parcel is inconsistent with its zoning and has the potential to degrade the prime agricultural soil and permanently remove this parcel from farming. The Connecticut State Department of Agriculture has taken the position that the erection of solar panels on prime agricultural soils compromises the future viability of farmland. It is stated that construction of a solar array will, and I quote, impact the farmland by the use of heavy equipment, installation of driven metal support posts, extensive trenching for electrical conduit, surface grading, construction of access roads, and equipment pads. These activities will have an adverse impact on the upper 24 inches of soil, which are critical to plant growth. Inversion of soil horizons, compaction, destruction of soil structure, acidification, loss of fertility, and changes to surface and subsurface soil hydrology are likely, with negative consequences for agricultural productivity. The department noted that when the project is decommissioned, the soil productivity will have been compromised. This was in a communication from Brian P. Hulbert, who is the Commissioner, State of Connecticut Department of Agriculture, to Melanie A. Bachman, B-A-C-H-M-A-N, Executive Director, Connecticut Siting Council, dated November the 5th, 2020. It is contrary to Richmond's zoning code and town policy to protect our agricultural sector to approve the erection of a solar array at the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. No one has any questions or comments for Graham. I think at the moment we'll take a 5-minute break if that's acceptable to everyone.
No yawning, Mary Ellen. Mary
Well,
Ellen, you're gonna have to. It's contagious.
It is contagious.
You gotta buy some dog biscuits. Throw that dog in.
You have no idea how many biscuits she's already gotten. I have them on the side of my computer because I'm trying to keep her quiet. But she is chasing the cats and the cats are knocking things over and I'm like, I'm gonna kill them all, I swear. It's just,
I just locked my cats upstairs.
oh, it's just awful. I don't know what's going, it's because I'm sitting in the other room and they don't like it when that happens, I guess.
Try drugs.
Yeah, well,
I'm
she's
serious.
yeah.
Drugs, they work every time.
Well, this is the one that we think has cancer and she doesn't act like she's got cancer. We still don't know the answer yet. She's just. Did you hear it? Could you hear? You must have been able to hear her. She was just really bad. So, and that's why I kept trying to, and I can't take my hands off the keys when I'm writing to mute myself. It's kind of like,
Yeah, I hope you didn't mind when I did that earlier.
No,
'cause
no,
I kind of-
if you hear a bark and just do it.
Yeah, I kind of figured that, once we hit a pause, you'd probably get back to unmuting yourself.
Well, I really only need to unmute myself if I need you to repeat yourself or something, or swear someone in, but she's never been this bad. This has really been bad.
I've never heard her bark before. Not in a meeting.
No, and she doesn't bark. So this is what I don't understand. It's like, and I don't know if it's because it's dark. It's dark. The house is not like all lit up. And yeah, just I don't understand it. Maybe because she hears people talking. That could be it. I don't know.
That could be. That could be. Thinks there's strangers in the house.
But she's not, I don't even know what she's barking at because she comes over and she's barking, not at me. She goes over to my cat. My cat's minding her business on the couch. She goes right over to the cat. I can hear her barking at the cat. Who knows? She just wants to entertain everybody, I guess. No, please, Sean, if you hear her barking, just mute me. Because I can't take my hands off the keys when people are talking. That's the problem.
I'll keep that in mind. I think, I hear you.
Usually she's very good, but I don't know what the heck is the story tonight.
Yeah, no worries. So let's see, I'm just looking to see who's back in the chair here. It looks like we got everybody. Is Jeff back? Yes. Okay. Looks like we got all the members back. So Mr. Vice Chair, I don't know if you want to proceed or not.
Yes, let's continue.
Okay, the next person I'm going to bring in to the panelist is Kim Robertson. And Kim has joined us now.
Kim, if you could please put your video on and your unmute yourself, that would be appreciated. Okay. Raise your right hand for me, sir. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name for the record.
It's Bruce Robertson, BruceRobertson.
Good evening, Bruce. How are you?
Oh, good, thanks. I just want to address, just some of the promises, or at least one specifically that Green has made, in that they are going to be supposedly burying cable along Beaver River Road. This is supposed to prevent cutting trees and putting in poles along that stretch of the road. It's supposed to, their claim is that it's going to lower the impact to the area. But I just wanted to bring attention to the applicant materials on tonight's agenda, Exhibit 12. That's the system impact study. That's basically outlines the changes that National Grid, one of the things it shows is the changes that National Grid will be required to make if this project is approved. And nowhere in there do I see anything that mentions cable being buried along Beaver River Road. So I don't believe that the developer has any intention of burying cable along Beaver River Road. Just if you refer to if you get a chance, page 5 of the executive summary, that's in system modifications, and bullet number 1, where they discuss, where they say that they're going to have to build 3,400 feet of 3-phase all aluminum cable using spacer primary along Shannock Hill Road and Beaver River Road. And then they're going to transition to something called cross arm configuration. And those two terms, spacer primary and cross arm configuration, pertain to how these cables are attached to poles. So if you also go to page 38 of the, that's the appendix, and that's the diagram of all the system changes. Again, there is nothing that indicates any underground, any underground cables being laid along Beaver River Road. It basically shows, again, spacer primary and cross arm on Beaver River Road. So again, these are changes that National Grid will have to make. This is not, burying the cable is something that National Grid will have to do, not the developer. So if there is a plan to, bury cable along Beaver River Road, the National Grid, from what I can see, is totally unaware of it. So this just seems like this is another empty promise that we're hearing from Green. And so basically, along with what everyone else has basically been saying tonight about, the inappropriateness of the location of this project, I would hope that you would vote to deny this project. Thank you.
Jeff, while Sean is bringing on the next person who wants to testify, you might want to ask John Mancini and Kevin Moran if they'd like to respond to that, since we're still in public hearing.
Certainly, thank you. Yes, John, if you're there,
We are, Mr. Chairman, we're still here, and we'd be more than happy to respond to that if we may.
Sure, turn your video on there. I can't see that you're there, but that'd be nice.
There. Yeah. We'll have Kevin respond to that question for you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, the draft impact study does read as was indicated, and it's part of the record. Also, I just want to, procedurally, what we've gone through so far is a Rhode Island, we also have a Rhode Island DEM freshwater wetlands permit for the whole project, which was permitted with RIDEM. We noticed the National Grid Impact Study. We designed it to transition to underground, and that is a change that we'd be happy to condition in any approval that we need to coordinate with National Grid on that, which we often do with National Grid. It's a draft impact study. They haven't issued their ISA, and it's not uncommon that we do go through some design modifications, both Grid coming back to us and us going back to Grid to work through issues just like the issue here on Beaver River Road, and trying to preserve the view corridor that exists there. So that is a change that we would need to do with National Grid. And again, we'd be happy to condition any approvals as such. And we work with them quite often. We have calls with them every 2 weeks. I think until we knew the outcome of this proceeding, we weren't going to have National Grid redesign and reissue the impact study. But I hope that adds some background for the board.
Actually confuses me a little bit. So can you re-explain it? Because I thought that we had a discussion previously that you were going to put underground services down Beaver River Road within a duck bank. And is what you're telling me is that with this discussion here is that that's not the case?
No, that is the design that's in front of you, and that was approved through a Rhode Island DEM freshwater wetlands permit. The plans show exactly that. They show the overhead improvements on Beaver River Road, equipment changes on South County Trail and Kingston Road on existing poles. So that's in the plan set before you. What I'm just clarifying is that that underground portion, we needed to work with National Grid before construction, which we often do, to incorporate that change and have them reissue the impact study.
So to be clear, Mr. Chairman, that is part of our proposal. It is a representation made to the board, and we'd be amenable to a condition to that. So we're not, what we've said and what's on the plans is exactly what our intention to build is.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other further questions for Bruce or John? If not, we will continue to the next participant.
We have no questions.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next individual is Rich Nasani. And Rich is joining as a panelist now.
All right, good evening.
Good evening, Rich.
Hi, Rich.
It's Rich Nasani, N like Nancy, A-S-S-A-N-E-Y.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. So my, just a couple of quick comments, echoing what all the other people who are opposing this solar array farm, whatever it is. There's a historical aspect that needs to be recognized and made sure that it's maintained. If this project goes forward, it would totally eliminate the ability for the town to be able to obtain that recognition for a historical landmark, which is very important to a lot of people in this town. Aside from the fact that it's right on a river, probably one of the most beautiful and pristine roads and scenic areas in our area, in our town, probably all of South County. There's a lot of things that are just wrong with the whole entire project. But just the fact that just about everybody in the town doesn't want it weighs quite heavily on me. So I hope that everyone takes that into consideration, along with all the other legal aspects that go along with it. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Sean, who do we have for our next participant?
Mr. Vice Chair, the next individual is Shannon Tibbetts. And Shannon is being added as a panelist now.
Good evening.
Good evening, Shannon.
Raise your right hand, ma'am. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Shannon. You heard from my mother earlier, Gail. I grew up at 165 Beaver River Road. I am the 4th generation of my family to live in that house. I have cherished memories of growing up and on Sundays, hot air balloons landing in the fields and going and swimming in the river every single weekend with my brother. So to see what this has done to my parents over the last 2 years is heartbreaking. The stress that it's caused, the never ending of what's going to happen is just, it's been a nightmare for my entire family. And I know for the town as well. So I speak from my heart to say that this is so painful to see this happening. I moved away from Rhode Island in 2006 after living here my entire life. I lived in Tampa for a number of years and I lived outside of Philadelphia. I just moved back to South County a year and a half ago. And I can tell you that coming back after living in cities has created a renowned appreciation for what we live in and the ruralness that we have. And it's just, I have a brand new appreciation. And to see this, it's just, we don't realize how lucky we are when we leave it. And then we come back and we see what we have, and to see this happening and the potential of having these solar farms come in. I understand that it's people's livelihood. I get it. But there are different ways that this can be solutioned. We don't need to be desecrating a historical area where my parents' house has been there since the 1700s. And we still dig up things in the backyard on a regular basis that we have no idea how old they are. They're still there. And it's just, I just wanted to speak up on behalf of my parents and the town and make sure that everyone understands we have to keep Richmond rural. And I just don't want to see this happen to this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. No one has any questions for Shannon. We can move on. Sean, if there's any other participants or.
Yeah, I saw just a moment ago, David Russo's hand was up and now it has gone back down. So it looks like the hand is now up again. So I will add David Russo. And David is joining as a panelist.
Good evening, David.
Good evening. My name is.
Do you solemnly swear? Go ahead, wait a minute. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, and it's.
Please state
David
your full
Russo,
name.
Russo. Good to begin?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I would just like to say, first of all, I am the Vice President of Beaver River Valley Community Association. And I also have over 200 members that support our opposition to this development on Beaver River Road. In addition, I'd like to point out something that was brought up just recently by Bruce Robertson, that there is no connection agreement with Narragansett Grid with green development. And I believe that they led you folks on the panel to believe that they were going to do an underground installation without any agreement or plans with National Grid. And John and Kevin even alluded to that. So I think it just shows another example of green development, how they are trying to say something, but not really give you all the details. My belief is that they're going to come back and say, Narragansett Grid's not going to do it this way. They own the roadside. Why won't they put in poles? So they're going to put the poles in. There's going to be 10 to 12 poles, and the ones at the end are going to be the bigger poles. And they're going to clear the sides of the road, the trees, to get the poles in. They're going to come back and tell you this. That's one point. The other thing is that they have not shown that this is in harmony with the surrounding area. And that's important. And there's going to be a lot of construction on the roadside, putting in the poles, banging in the structures they need to put the solar panels up. And that is also going to permanently harm the ground, the surrounding area. And that's going to be a permanent environmental impact. Basically, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We have any more raised hands, Sean?
No, I don't see any other, anyone on the, well, excuse me, I misspoke. There's Walt P. is the next individual I'm going to bring in as a panelist. And Walt is joining now.
That would be Walt Prescott. If you want to write his name in, Sean.
How about now?
Walt, can you tell, can I see you?
No, I think it's still coming up.
You have to turn on your video.
Yeah, I did.
Oh. There you are.
Hey, here I am.
How are you?
I'm good. How about you, Mary Ellen?
Good, thank you. Raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name for the record.
Walter Prescott, Prescott, 129 North Road. I was going to give you a nice lengthy dissertation about Dr. Lang's report, but I don't think I need to. I think that's been summed up rather well. So I think I'll just barely speak to it. The summary that you folks probably received plainly states that land values, that housing values will decrease because of solar arrays. The interview conducted by the Providence Journal and published on September the 30th of 2020 plainly states the same thing. So I guess in summation, just to keep it nice and short, either Mr. Sweeney and his cohorts have misread, or Dr. Lang is guilty of talking out of both sides of his mouth. I tend to believe Dr. Lang much quicker than I would the folks who are speaking on behalf of the applicant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walt. Sean, do we have any more raised hands?
Let's see, at this point I have Mr. Steve Lausner. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Is being promoted to a panelist. And Steve is with us.
Okay. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Lusner, but I can't see you.
Yeah, it's Steve Lusner. Oh, video. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Raise your right hand for me, sir. Do
Okay.
you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please state your full name for the record.
Steve Lusner.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I don't normally participate in things like this, but I've been watching the discussion. I actually live right down the street from this thing, this proposed thing. And unlike all the folks that stand to make material gain from it or live somewhere else, I live right down the street from it. So I'm very strongly opposed to this. And the idea that you can equate solar panels and farming is like, to me, equating ocean drilling and fishing. You know, it's two different things. So I'm very opposed to it, and I hope it does not get approved. I'm actually trained as an organic chemist, and if you look up the chemicals that are in the solar panels, you have silicone tetrachloride, you have cadmium, you have lead, all types of things. It's a very dim idea to put this thing right on the most beautiful river we have in this state. Very, very dim idea. So with that, I'll just, say thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Steve. Sean, do we have any more raised hands?
Mr. Vice Chair, Gina Thurn has her hand up raised for a second time. I'm not sure if the board would allow her to speak once more.
Anyone object? Yeah, we'll have her come on. She spoke once before.
Okay. Gina is being added again as a panelist. And she's with us now.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak a second time. Obviously, there's a lot of opposition here to this project tonight, and I guess I'm the lone standout as being someone who supports it. Farming is not easy. We'd all do it if it was. We value our land. We value the hard work that goes into maintaining the land to produce a product, be it vegetables or be it meat or fiber. We work our butts off. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. One of the things that as farmers we've had to do is change and adapt to our situations. That's easier said than done when the dollars aren't there to change what you're doing. Say, well, grow another crop. Well, it takes dollars to grow another crop. It takes dollars to change your infrastructure. And I think that's what stamps are trying to accomplish here, is to be able to finance that change and keep the land with the potential to farm it, rather than being forced into a position of having to sell it. I feel like several people tonight have discounted or at least ignored the option of dual use with solar arrays. I would cordially invite you to come visit my farm and see what I do in the spring as we grow under our solar panels and we grow around the array and in the space. I've had my soil tested before and after. I've had my water tested before and after. I don't have a contamination issue from my solar panels. My solar panels are right outside my kitchen window. I look at them every single day. They don't make any noise. Yes, they made some noise during construction, but once that was done, They don't make any noise. They don't bark at me endlessly. They don't yell at me. They actually make people slow down on the road. We've had less accidents on our curve since the panels went in, which is kind of ironic because I felt like I called the cops just about every year prior to that. They have created a space that is more functional to me as a farmer to grow crops in and more productive. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, you have a very small array, and yes, I do. I have a very small piece of property. It takes time to convert into dual use, but time is what's needed here. I've heard a lot of people tonight talk about their property values and how they might go down. And having testified at several different towns, being in Exeter and testifying in Exeter as well, I've heard commentary over the years about farmers that put their land into solar are just cashing out. Cashing out is selling out. This is trying to figure out a way to survive, a way to live. The Stamp family is trying to figure out how to stay in farming, and they're at their last ditch effort. Farmers don't change this dramatically easily. It was a long, hard decision to even try to go this route, just to try to salvage what they had. And believe me, there's a lot of tears and thought and consideration that went into this. They have been stewards of that land for so many years. The last thing they want to do is destroy it. And if they believe that solar would destroy the land, they never would have even considered doing this. This was a way to save it. It was a way to prevent it from having houses and more septics and more wells and more everything, more cars, more noise, more people. It was a way to keep it open, to keep it paid for, to keep it solvent, so that they could survive to farm again, so that their family could survive to farm again. And I find it, I guess, ironic that the majority of the people who have spoken tonight have talked about how it's ruining this might ruin their lives. What about the Stamps' lives? Do they matter? Do they count in the town of Richmond? The fact that they have put their blood and sweat and tears into this land for so long, to be told, yeah, you don't matter. Go away. It's none of your business. I think all of you need to consider that it's not just about you and it's not just about them. There is a lot of value to everybody, whether they live on that property or not. They were there. They worked it all the time. They know all of you. They've been friends with many of you over the years. And instead of working out a compromise or a solution that would help them keep farming, this has become the most negative display and antagonistic display I have seen in a long time about it's all about me and who cares about you. I don't know any of you guys. I don't live there. It's just my 2 cents. But I'm a farmer, and it breaks my heart to see what they have gone through just to try to salvage their ability to farm. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Do we have any more hands raised for participant there, Sean?
Yep, Mr. Chair, I have person E. Bibler who I'm going to add as a panelist. And E. Bibler is joining the panelist now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. Need to have you sworn in, please.
Okay.
Raise your right hand, sir. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Eric Bibler. I waited to the end because I'm actually a resident of Hopkinton, just on the other side of the Wood River Bridge. We've had a similar experience to the residents of Richmond. I think over the past 3 to 4 years, we've had about 35 solar proposals in the town of Hopkinton. Some landowners have received upwards of 50 to 70 proposals. Every large landowner in town basically has received a welter of proposals. You know, I want to tread lightly here tonight because John Mancini and his client, Mark DePasquale, have already targeted me for unauthorized practice of law with a bogus complaint that has cost me thousands of dollars. Some of the other commenters tonight, just to fend it off, some of the commenters tonight have noted that Green Development and Mr. DePasquale have a long, well-documented history of litigation, of DEM violations, and of failure to adhere to approved plans. Someone cited the instance in Coventry where Green Development was denied a permit and they began building their facility anyway, and the town had to issue a cease and desist order. But I wanted to jump in for 2 reasons that I thought, just 2 pieces of information that I thought might be beneficial to the committee here. In the early part of the discussion tonight, there was quite a protracted discussion over the definition of the word within, which seems pretty self-evident to all of us, I think. And the definitions in Webster's, you know, implying containment were also crystal clear. But the example was given by Mr. Mancini. And again, John Mancini, I'm not an attorney, so let me just say that up front. If you look at the definition in Webster's, well, he cited the example of the standard notice provision that requires that every abutter within 200 feet of a project receive notice of a project like this. The Webster's definition of a butt is to border on or to touch along an edge. Now, I mean, I think that's relevant because when you're talking about your solar ordinance, you're talking about a solar system as defined falling within a 2-mile radius. The provision that requires a notice to a abutter requires notice to any property owner who has a boundary that's within 200 feet, not his entire property. I mean, this is just a basic element of law that I think has probably been distorted, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'll leave that to you know, your solicitor to advise you on that. But the other ironic thing this evening is, you know, solar farms are not farms. And that's not just a subjective opinion. What's ironic is that none other than Mr. DePasquale was involved in a legal action that was decided by the Rhode Island Supreme Court in 2016. And I believe it was, I can give you the case number if you want it. It was in North Kingstown. And there was a dispute over whether a wind turbine installed by Mr. DePasquale should be taxed as property. The Supreme Court precedent decision in that case was that the wind turbine, which converted wind energy to electricity, was a piece of manufacturing equipment, and operating a wind turbine was a manufacturing use. Then approximately a year later in 2017, there was a Superior Court decision in Portsmouth, which determined that cited this Supreme Court case involving Mr. DePasquale, and determined that solar energy that converts sunlight to electricity, by extension of the Supreme Court precedent that involved Mr. DePasquale, that solar energy is a manufacturing use. And it's a manufacturing process. So I think that we should all get over this idea that farming and so-called solar farming, which is a manufacturing process to manufacture electricity for commercial sale on an industrial scale by installing an electric utility, a power plant. We need to get over this idea that that has any bearing or any relationship to farming. And what I see happening in front of me now is the same tragic thing that I've seen in Hopkinton. I bet I've been to 100 meetings over the last 2.5 years. It's divided the community, project after project. As I said, we've had 35 proposals. We have one that I know of in Hopkinton on Maxon Hill Road that was installed and managed by Green Development. It's by far the worst project in the town of Hopkinton. It generated a torrent of complaints. There are still complaints with that installation. But the real tragedy is that every town has a comprehensive plan for development. You have your comprehensive community plan. And what I've heard tonight and in other hearings in Richmond that I've attended is that your plan is very similar to ours in that when you formulated your comprehensive plan and you surveyed your residents and you asked them what they valued most about the town of Richmond, they responded in a virtually identical way to Hopkinton residents. And they said, it was said tonight that 95% of the respondents said that the thing that they valued most in the town of Hopkinton was its rural character. So I would simply submit that to install this huge utility in this pristine area, which has natural and cultural and historic significance, as we've all heard through all this testimony, not only is it not compatible with your comprehensive plan, grossly incompatible, but as I've said in Hopkinton many times, that comprehensive plan that is proposed by the planning board, which seeks input from residents, which is ultimately approved by the town council, that's a social contract between your town government and the residents. And every single person who considers a purchase of property, considers moving to Richmond, relies upon that. That's your word. That's what you've stated, how you're going to define your town. And if you don't uphold that promise, if you say that that's what you stand for, and then you don't defend that, then I think you're breaking that. I think you're breaking that promise. And then finally, there's this whole issue of, buffers and setbacks and so forth. No matter what is done in terms of a landscaping plan, to hide the fence and the setbacks and so forth, there's this idea that all of these people that have spoken tonight that walk and ride their bikes and drive by on their way to and from work and everything, this idea that somehow it'll be hidden and you'll never know it's there is just wrong. Every abutter is going to know it's there. All the neighbors will see it through the trees. They're going to know. Every resident knows it's there. every board member here is going to know it's there. And when you go by it, whether you even see it or not from any particular perspective, it's going to change the way that you feel about what your town represents. You're going to be the town that has these electric utilities built into it, here, there, and everywhere. And it's just absolutely going to change the character of your town. So I think you have every good reason, both, I'm not a lawyer. Can you hear me, John? I think you have every good reason based on the definitions in the ordinance. But also, these larger reasons of it's your town. I suppose if you deny it, you'll probably get sued. I don't think you should be intimidated by that. I think you should do whatever you think is best for your town and within the limits of your authority the scope of your authority to make those decisions. Thank you for indulging me, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you. Sean, do we have any more hands raised in the participant gallery?
Similar to a previous speaker, Mr. Vice Chair, we do have two individuals that have spoken already previously. I'm not sure if you wanted to readmit them or not.
I would like to make a suggestion that you not allow people to speak a second time unless they're going to say something different from what they said the first time.
Yeah, how are we gonna know that?
Well, that's the rule we used to use in South Kingstown, and it worked pretty well. So I think you should give it a try. Just tell them up front. If
Well, they
you're
can
going
hear
to
us
say what you
now.
said before, don't bother. But if you have something new, you can speak.
Yeah, they can hear us now, correct?
I have no problem with it.
Okay.
Okay. That being the case, I will readmit James Borsick to the panel. And James is rejoining us.
Good evening. This is going to be short and sweet. This is just a comment on Mrs. Thurn, I believe was her name. She may have had her soil tested. She may have no environmental problems right now, and I'm thankful for that and thankful for her. But 25 years ago, the Cape May dumped thousands of gallons of oil on our shores, and it was months of cleanup in a boat that had no problems until there was a problem. Chernobyl, the oil rig in the Gulf. You heard from an organic chemist what's in those things. And it's on the aquifer. And that's my comment. So I'm glad she didn't have a problem, and she hasn't had a problem, but she could. Just as we could if there's an issue with these panels. Thank you for your time, and thank you for letting me speak again.
Thank you, James.
Hey, fuck you, bitch.
We could hear you, James. Please mute
Great.
yourself.
Thank you, James. Sean, do we have another participant hand raise?
Yes, Mr. Alan Kinsley would like to be readmitted. And Alan is rejoining.
Greetings, Alan.
Good evening. I just, as a farmer, I wanted to rejoin the meeting because Gina was allowed to bring up her opinion a second time. And I would like to specifically make sure that everyone knows that her solar panels were installed by Green Energy. And not only that, that her solar panels are different than what they're proposing for Beaver River Road, where they specifically left places in between those panels for her to grow vegetables. The panels they're proposing on Beaver River Road have nothing to do with agriculture, have nothing to do with leaving space to grow crops or to do anything. And I think for anyone to consider this project agricultural is a slap in the face to anyone who is actively pursuing farming at this time in It has not been easy to be a farmer during COVID. I am scared out of my mind every day that I'm going to lose everything I own because I'm trying to do something good for this community and save open space and actively farm this land. But yet I still do that without the help of, outside money from solar, who has several times come over here and wanted to take my pasture away from me. So I would just like to make sure that everyone out there knows that she is speaking on the behalf of green energy, and her solar system is completely different than what they're proposing for Beaver River Road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Sean, are we at the end of?
Mr. Vice Chair, I do have Ms. Gina Thurn would like to raise her hand for a third time and ask to be readmitted.
I object to that.
Yeah, I'm think two times is enough.
No.
Okay, so with that, if there is anyone else who has not spoken who would like to be called on, you have the ability to raise your hand if you're using your computer, or if you are using dial tone, you would want to hit *9 to raise your hand, and we'll be able to call on you. So as of right now, I'm not seeing anyone else who is raising their hands, Mr. Vice Chair.
Very good. Okay, so moving along. Where are we at, Karen? We can call it for the evening, or?
Well, you have a choice. You can close the public hearing, or if you think you might have some more questions later or want some more information later, you can leave it open and continue it to a date certain. Or you can start to discuss your feelings about how you think you're going to vote tonight, or you can wait and do it at a later date, either at the next regularly scheduled meeting or at a work session. It's entirely up to what you guys want to do.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Daniel Jarstfer.
Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, I would move that we close public debate.
You mean close the public hearing?
Yeah, public hearing. I'm sorry, wrong word.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you understand that if you close the public hearing, that means that no one else can provide you with any information, either information you want or information you don't want.
Understood. I'm full of information.
Okay.
Sean
Chelsea
Carney, I'll
Banger.
second that.
Chelsea Banger, I second that also.
Okay, let's close the public hearing.
We need to vote.
Sean Carney, aye.
Chelsea Banger, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, aye.
Daniel Jarstfer, aye.
Jeff, aye.
So now you have to decide what you want to do about the decision. You're going to need to make findings of fact and conclusions of law. You might not want to talk about that now at 23 minutes past 10 in the evening. I know I certainly don't. But it's up to you. You can all go home and think about it and try to come up with some findings of fact to put together to make a decision. You can agree to discuss this at your next meeting on February 22nd, or you can schedule a special work session to talk about it. The work session would be a public meeting, but it would not be part of the public hearing, and you would not be taking any kind of testimony or comment from the public.
This is Chelsea Banger. I think just continuing this to our next scheduled meeting to go over our findings of fact would be fine for me. I don't think I need a work meeting.
I agree.
Sean Carney, I agree on that.
Yeah.
Lindsay Hannon, I agree.
Yeah, I agree to continue.
It'll give us
this,
So what you want to do is continue this agenda item not the public hearing, but just the agenda item, to February 22nd for discussion and a decision.
I move that we continue this agenda item until our next stated meeting, the 22nd of February, where we'll discuss and render a decision.
Sean Carney, second.
All in favor?
Chelsea Banger, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, I.
Sean
Aye.
Carney, aye.
Daniel Jarvis for aye.
Okay. Jeff Valencourt, aye.
Is it appropriate for a motion to adjourn, or is there any other thing, business on the docket, Mr. Vice Chairman?
Mr. Vice Chair, just one quick point of order. We do have a review of the 2021 zoning board meeting calendar that I just wanted to bring to the board's attention. Just outlines the monthly schedule for this year.
Unfortunately, the state law says that every board and commission has to approve a yearly schedule of meetings at the beginning of each year. It doesn't mean that you absolutely have to meet on those dates. You just have to post that schedule so people know when you're planning roughly to meet. So all you need to do is vote to approve the proposed schedule of meetings for 2021.
Can I get a motion to approve the
Proposed schedule of meetings for 2021.
Yes.
Chelsea Banger, I make a motion to approve the proposed scheduled meetings of 2021.
Sean Carney, I second.
Daniel
All in favor?
Jarvis for on vote aye.
Chelsea Banger, aye.
Lindsay Hannon, I.
Jeff Valencourt, aye.
Sean Carney, aye.
Okay. Approved.
Now you can adjourn.
May we?
Yeah.
Yeah, motion.
I motion we conclude tonight's meeting.
That's very
Second.
original.
Bye, good night.
Good night.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I.
Night, everybody.
Aye.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Mary
you.
Ellen.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. Good night.